take as well. Hello everyone, welcome back to another film discussion. My name is Adam, and in today's video I want to give you 7 reasons why 4K ain't all that. Now, to be honest, I love 4K. Don't get me wrong here, okay? It is a very good format for a 4K TV or a 4K projector with the HDR that can be applied, and, you know, it is a really good improvement over, like, DVD and Blu-ray. But it ain't all that. And the reason it ain't all that is mainly because of the studios that utilize this format and present their films in a less desirable way. It ain't all that. Now, before I give you my 7 reasons why 4K ain't all that, and, you know, in all honesty, you could use DVD and you could use Blu-ray and you could save yourself a whole heap of money for more films. Let me just quickly take you through a little history on how they processed these films to discs way back when home media first started. Obviously, Jaws was the first one on VHS, you know, first Hollywood blockbuster. And up until 1993, the process was pretty much the same. They would take the 35mm film, which, by the way, I love 35mm celluloid as a format, and I wish more films shot on that. But Hollywood likes to, you know, get that money in, and one way, you know, which they can save money is use digital, you know, over celluloid, because it costs so much money. But I can always tell when they've used the filter of a 35mm system on digital instead of using actual 35mm. Happens more than you think. Anyway, 35mm, the process of taking that and turning it into a VHS up until 1993 was the same. They would take the 35mm, run it through this machine, and I'm going to simplify this process, by the way. They'd run it through this machine, which would scan every single frame at 1,000 lines per frame and record it to basically what is a giant VHS tape. It's a magnetic master reel, but to simplify it, giant VHS tape, and that would be known as the magnetic master, right? An analog master of the 35mm prints. And they would then take this analog master and they would run it through another machine, which would then basically create a duplication that they can then go and use without harming the master now, because magnetic tape, the more you play it, the more you're wearing it away. So they don't want to wear away this magnetic master too much, so they clone it, basically, create a child copy, and then that child copy will go on to create hundreds or thousands of VHS tapes. Obviously not this one, because this came out in 1993. But yeah, it would go on to make loads of VHS tapes. And it would look like a giant pirate scheme, basically. And then when that child is worn out, you know, or gets to a certain level of degradation, they bin it, throw that child in the bin, they go back to the master, and then they clone another copy. They only have to clone the master probably a few dozen times to make all the tapes they need, you know, but then that master is done. Like, they store it usually. But up until 1993, that was the process. Now, George Lucas comes along with his THX program, revolutionizes it by going, can we not scan at 2K instead of 1K? And so, from that point on, 1993, they started making 2K scans of 35mm prints as industry standard as part of the THX specification. And up until probably 1999, I would say, that was the way films were brought out on VHS, and how they were also brought out on Laserdisc. So, in 1994, when old True Lies is coming out, this would have been sourced from an analog master. And this is an analog digital, you know, disc, basically. It's like a giant CD, isn't it? So it is digitally encoded, but it's analogically produced you know, if that makes sense, like a CD is. Digitally encoded, but then is replicated analogically, if that's a word, when you watch it. So this would have come from an analog master as part of the THX program, meaning it was scanned at 2K rather than 1K. I don't think this came out before 1999, did it? Tell me if there was a version on DVD before 1999, because in 1999 things changed. And that's when this puppy came out. Now, it's a bit weird because if you look on here, on the THX Laserdisc version, it don't say digitally mastered. It's like, huh, why not? Like, because it's an analog master, that's why. But in 1999, another revolution, and again, it probably was George Lucas, you know, but things changed where instead of using an analog master, they would scan at 2K, and the machine to do this had upgraded again, and it would create on a computer now a digital intermediate transport stream file. And this could be like huge, could be like 10, 12 terabytes big, you know, huge, because it's scanning 2,000 lines per every single film cell, and there's hundreds of thousands of those, you know, in a movie. So it's building up information, and I think it was probably in the form of JPEGs. I could be wrong on that, but it was all encased in what's known as a package of a transport stream, terabytes in size. And then that would be transcoded to create, because now we're in the DVD era, the DVD with a much cleaner picture, because it's gone through the digital stage and it completely bypassed now the analog stage, except for the 35mm it comes from. So from 1999 onwards up until 2009, films were always scanned at 2K and then transcoded to DVD. And then in 2006, I think it was, when Blu-ray came out, that's exactly how they were made. They were using that same digital intermediate file. They would then put it on Blu-ray because it was from a 2K source. Blu-ray's only 1K effectively. They get away with it, or like 1.5K if you want to be picky. So this copy of Face Off, this DVD and this Blu-ray both share the same common master. So I'm not really sure what year this was released. I can't see a date of 2007. So yeah, this would have shared the same master as this. So basically the same elements within the film would have been captured at the scan, and then you'd see them in both releases. You'd just see them like slightly less in that version over this version. Like the Blu-ray would be deeper color, you know, more sharper picture, but effectively exactly the same. You know, obviously these two are different because this is the UK cut version and this is the American uncut version. So in that respect, not the same, but Blu-ray and DVD, they would have the same common master, the same digital intermediate master. And so, and I forgot the greatest film of all, didn't I? So, yeah, having to backtrack a little bit here, sorry. So this Laserdisc, which is THX approved, meaning it was scanned at 2K, this came out in 1995. So this would have been scanned at 2K, and it would have been way better than the VHS copy before it, or even the Laserdisc before it, like, which would have also come from a 1K master. This would be scanned at 2K for a better picture transfer onto the disc. And I believe in 2001, Jaws also had a re-release, or a first release on DVD. I don't have that DVD, I'm sorry, but that came from a 2K digital intermediate file instead of the analog master that the Laserdisc was made on. When it came time for the Blu-ray, and I believe this came out in 2012, things had changed in 2012. By 2009, movie studios were scanning their 35mm films in 4K. So 4,000 lines of resolution, because they knew, A, it would look better on Blu-ray, but in case the next format comes along, which a few years later it did. So they were scanning prints as far back as 2009, ready for 4K. So this Blu-ray is sourced from a 4K scan. Now obviously on Blu-ray it doesn't like pick up all the 4K details, the 4K scan, which, to be honest, and this is one of the first points why 4K and all that, the 4K scanning picks up everything. It picks up too much, effectively. It picks up all the grain, all the dust, you know, and all the dirt in that print, and it puts it in 4K. A 2K scan wouldn't pick up as much grain, wouldn't pick up as much dirt and dust, and in all honesty, back then the prints wouldn't have been as, you know, degraded anyway. You know, a film that has just been made will have fresh prints. Prints that have been lying around for like 10-20 years will be degraded. It's just the way celluloid works. And so now, if you're scanning degraded prints in 4K, you've got to scrub them clean so they look a little bit better. Otherwise, you've got proper problems. Probably why Cameron decided to change his colouring on this. The prints were probably knackered. And so he decided, well, they've been falling apart anyway, I might as well, you know, destroy the colouring as well. Like, that's probably why this was changed so much. Not because he wanted to, but because the prints were that badly damaged or faded or just used. Because, you know, like the way we talked about, they'd make a VHS, they'd make an analog master and then send it to a child. Prints are pretty much done in the same fashion. You've got the camera negatives, that's the hardcore initial version of the film, and they'll usually, when they put it together, create either like an interpositive or a like another negative that will then go into archive, you know, and then they put the camera, you know, negatives away, and then this baby, as it were, would be then used to strike off prints or to create the first master print, and then that master print would strike off multiple prints. So there's like 3 generations away from the original camera negatives, you know. But obviously if you go back to camera negatives like the Vinegar Syndrome people did for Daryl, you're gonna have a much better picture quality. But it doesn't matter, like, they still have been sitting on the shelf for a very long time. So DNR now has to be used because the grain or the celluloid will have begun to break down. And a lot of films that have been scanned in 4K in 2009 were done because they had to, because they would have lost the film, you know, in like a couple of decades with the degradation of film. And so, like, at the end of the day, you don't have to watch this version if you don't like it. You can go back to the Blu-ray before it, which I do have somewhere lying around, and that will have come from a 2K scan. And that will probably have a much nicer, cleaner print scanning process of master to disc, if that makes any sense to you. Like, any film that's been made after 2009 is probably been 4K scanned and processed digitally anyway. Like, they started to move away from 35mm even as far back as 2010, you know. When like the world went digital, you know, like cinemas, you know, and all that. So yeah, so that's the process of basically how films are put together, you know. So number one reason why 4K and all that is because the scanning method, you know, is taking older prints and scanning a lot of high resolution off it and picking up all the dirt and dust. Now, a 2K scan will pick up just as much of the film elements within each frame, just as much as a 4K scan will, you know. It will obviously do a better job than a 1K scan, but a 2K scan is all you need. You don't need to be scanning in 4K on old prints unless you're trying to restore it and, you know, create a new negative, you know. But for films on disc, a 2K, you know, the Westworld TV show was all shot on 35mm film. They scanned it at 2K for the 4K release. They scanned at 2K and then they mastered upscaled to 4K. That 4K is just a glorified 2K, and a lot of 4Ks are like that. So another reason why, you know, it ain't all that is because a lot of 4Ks aren't true 4Ks. You know, if anything, they need to be start saying true 4K on the disc when you know it was scanned at 4K, mastered at 4K, and burned at 4K. That's actually a very rare process. Like, I believe Darrow was done like that, and there are a few other films like that. None of these Jurassic Parks were done like that. These were all 2K scanned upscaled to 4K. This one was scanned in 4K and mastered in 4K. But I will say this. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of resources to have a full 4K timeline. It is a lot cheaper, a lot quicker, a lot easier to do a 2K job and then upscale it to 4K. So a lot of 4Ks are just upscales using AI and then DNR to hide the sort of, you know, and sharpen it up with HDR. Like, you're not getting the full 4K true experience on your telly. You know, you might as well have just used the Blu-ray. And then you let your TV and your 4K player upscale the Blu-ray, and you're pretty much getting the same experience, but you're not getting HDR on top of it. The format of 4K adding HDR, you know, that they also proudly state on disc sometimes. Where is it? Here it is on this one. Is it the HDR? You know, it's the format that holds this ability for the extended dynamic range of HDR. It's not the film, it's the format. So you literally, you could put a VHS on 4K with HDR. You know, you don't have to have HDR to enjoy a film. You know, I can enjoy the Blu-ray version in this set, which doesn't have HDR, just as well as the 4K that does. Because HDR doesn't come from the print. It does help a 4K disc look like a print, but it's not the be-all and end-all, you know. Second reason why it ain't all that is, like I said, films up to 2010, they've been scanned at 2K intermediate, and the reason it was 2K, well, probably not the reason it was 2K, but a reason why it was 2K, and I'm trying to find a film here that I can use. Here, we use Jurassic Park 3, it'll have to be. So this film came out in 2001, and it's got a lot of CGI dinosaurs in it. And up until 2009, 2010, all the CGI that, you know, Industrial Light and Magic, Digital Domain, even Weta, up until about 2009, all the CGI was being rendered in 2K. So the dinosaurs for this film have been made in 2K, and probably partly goes to the reason why for the mastering stage it's done in 2K, because it's match for match. The special effects will blend into the film elements if the film is brought down to 2K to match those CGI elements, and then when it gets downscaled to DVD, to Blu-ray, like, they blend so much better. They look so much more realistic, photorealistic. But when you take that 2K scan, and we're going to use the same illustration because that's exactly what happened here. When you take that 2K scan and then you upscale it to 4K, you're upscaling that inherent 2K CGI stuff as well. And anything digitally upscaled doesn't look as good, you know, as being native, you know, to that resolution. So a film that is more native to the 4K system, which is what this is going to look better in the terms of special effects, because special effects were probably made in 4K for this film, whereas in this film they were made in 2K. So in 4K it ain't going to look as good. Now, when I say made in 4K, don't forget, this is probably, they've probably gone back to the original print to scan it to make this 4K. They might have gone back to the original digital intermediate file that the DVD comes from, and then taken that and upscaled that. That's a possibility. But they could have also gone back and done a 4K scan, you know, because when did this come out? Like, (2018). So most likely they went back to the prints or negatives of the film with the 2K dinosaurs in, and then they scanned it at 4K, ready for this 4K. Well, that's still upscaling the CGI. When you're scanning at 4K and then putting it on disc at 4K, the dinosaurs are still 2K. They haven't changed. It's just been scanned and then printed. Okay? I hope what I'm saying is coming across to you, because there's a massive difference between upscaling to 4K and actually a native 4K. And any film made before 2009 is going to be an upscale to 4K on 4K. Any film after 2009 has a high chance of being a native 4K, because all the CGI was rendered in 4K after about 2010. So that's going to be true native. But whereas all these films before it, even Terminator 2, will have basically a upscale process, because the CGI, like James Cameron, when he made this 4K disc, he did not go back to the CGI in this film and remake it. He didn't redo the CGI in 4K, which is what he could have done. He could have done that, and then this would be a true 4K film. But most of the elements in this film are 2K, which means they've been upscaled to 4K. And that doesn't look good when you digitally upscale. The reason number 3 is AI. AI and DNR are heavily used in 4K films, and it just completely takes away from the originalness of that film elements. You know, AI doesn't know the difference between an eyeball and a cloud and a tree and a signpost. They are basically programmed algorithms that scrub an image and can scrub the detail. Like so many films, including Terminator 2, where the softness of the skin isn't there. The sharpness of the skin isn't there. It's got more of a softer look to it. You know, I'm not going to get True Lies on 4K because a lot of people, and I've seen it, there's a lot of soft facial features. Do you remember when the Hunter edition of Predator came out? Everybody looked like a waxwork figure because that had heavy DNR used, and it was probably from a 4K scan of the original negative. And that's got, again, you know, probably 1K elements of CGI in it, you know, rather than 2K. So a 1K upscale to 4K, or go use the DVD, which is actually going to have a downscale of that CGI, which makes it look a lot better. Like Predator on DVD is probably going to look better than Predator on 4K, you know, and that's crazy to say that. The fourth reason, like we talked about with Terminator, The Abyss, there's so many films I could name where they change the color grade of the picture. The Silence of the Lambs Kino Lorber edition, they change the grade of the picture color. And that happens because 4K has a wide dynamic range for both color. You know, it's one above Blu-ray. It can have bolder colors, HDR, to make it even look better. It doesn't mean it has to be used. It doesn't mean if the color space ain't there, like, you don't need to fill it. But a lot of people, they want to fill that extra range, and so let's change the color a little bit so we can extend it into that dynamic range, and that alters the grading of the film, and I'm not on board with that one. I'm not on board with altering the original intent of the theatrical coloring of that the director of photography has laid down and worked together with the lighting department, and the look of the film is very much important, I'd say, and I'm not on board with the changes made in 4K. I'd rather stick to a DVD or a VHS if you're going to completely change the color grade on 4K. Like, yeah, I've got Terminator 2 on 4K, but I prefer watching the Blu-ray, and I think most people do on that. There might be some people who prefer the 4K, but purists of film, I'd say, prefer the purest to the 35mm print. So number 5, the audio. Let's go back to Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park number 1, number uno. This was the first, or one of the first films that utilized the DTS system in the theaters. It has DTS master audio on here, and we could even use Jaws as probably a better example. But it also says, is that Dolby Atmos? Yes, it is. It also comes with Dolby Atmos, but it's not DTS, it's DTS Master Audio HD and DTS Digital Surround, right? DTS and Master DTS are not the same thing. And this sounds way wanker than the Laserdisc, which has a lot more punch and pack to it. This sounds like it's been thinned out and spread out, whereas the Laserdisc sounds like it's a perfect match, for the speakers, because it was created for a 6, speaker setup, not a 12 speaker setup, or a 10 speaker setup. And so it sounds a bit weaker in my setup. Like, I prefer the Laserdisc over that 4K. And Jaws, this is a prime example. Like, this one says it's got DTS Master Audio again, and Digital Surround DTS, and Dolby Digital. So when this came into the cinemas, it was pretty much stereo tracked. There was mono track as well. I believe it was mono in the cinema in the first instance, but on home media it definitely was. But for the Laserdisc, they redid the sound, didn't they? So for this film here, they would have then taken the original audio elements and created a whole new, probably stereo or stereo surround. I doubt it would have been 5.1 AC3. But then for the Blu-ray and even the DVD would have had 5.1 stereo surround. But for this one, they would have then taken it and done it again up in DTS sound. So, this would have probably been made. Basically, what I'm trying to say is a lot of 4Ks, the audio isn't the original theatrical audio. It's been stretched out to fit Dolby Atmos, and it sounds weaker. The bass response just isn't there. And it's not my setup. It's the fact that they've taken a stereo sourced surround, or a 6-track DTS, and they've turned it into something else and to fit the current format, and it just does not have that same beef as before. Number 5 is definitely stretched out audio tracks for Dolby Atmos. I'm so glad they didn't do that for Daryl. It's just a stereo track on there, what was on the actual print. Number 6 is the fact, like I said, if we go and scan Jaws, the original negative, it's probably in a pretty bad state, coming from 1975, and kind of at the time a low budget film. Like, it wasn't filmed as a blockbuster, it was filmed, as a film with probably not a lot of intention on it, so the stock of the film probably wasn't that great. And it's like over 20 plus years old, so the negatives are not going to be in a very good way. And obviously in 1995 a restoration job had to be done, and that was only 20 years after the film was made. So you know, now it's been digitally saved, so, you know, they don't have to do like another restoration job. Although I'm sure he did on 4K, but prints degrade over time. So when you scan older prints of movies, we've gone back to the negatives, guys. Yeah, great. What kind of condition were they in, by the way? Nobody ever puts the production notes of the process of how they do it. They just say, we went back to the 35mm camera negatives, scanned it to 4K, and there you go. And that's it. Well, sorry, what was the process in between? What were the quality of those negatives in? Did you have to then pretty much restore the film? Was it a preservation job, and now you're just sort of jumping on the back of that with the 4K release? Like, I like a bit more information, please. You know, before I part my money with a 4K release, which is going to end up looking like Terminator 2. You know, I'd rather have my 4K releases looking like whatever reference level, you know, insert the reference level film here, you know. Anyway, number 7, the final one, you know, there's too much editing going on in 4K releases. I've got 7 on DVD, and I've got 7 on Laserdisc. I'll never get 7 on 4K because it's been AI changed. It's been replaced. The elements within the film have been altered. Like, that's up to the director. You want to change your film, you can George Lucas all day long. I actually preferred your original theatrical release, mate. I thought it was perfectly fine. And if it's good enough for a 10-foot screen, it's good enough for my bloody, like, I don't know, 6-foot screen, whatever 65 inches is, at home. Like, don't need to be replacing faces of Kevin Spacey to make sure you don't see the stunt guy or a stand-in, or you know, replacing arms in scenes because you'll see that now. It's like, do it first time right, mate. You don't have to fix this shit. Like, AI rain? Really? Was that essential? Like, it's like George with his rocks and blinking Ewoks, you know? Really, George? 4K rocks. You couldn't have done that on the day. Put a rock there. Like, put a rock there. No, actually, you know what? We'll do that 20 years later in post. You know, it's like, honestly. They alter the films. They edit the films. They're not the original versions. And I don't like that at all. Like, when it's uncut, when it's unrated, extended, directors, that's fine, you know? But when you start chopping out and censoring some films as well, because, like, you know, something's happened in the world and now we don't want that being seen, I'd like to preserve the original theatrical, you know, thanks. Give me the choice. Put it on the disc. Give me the 4K, you know, when you make a 4K disc and there's a Blu-ray in there, can't you stick on that Blu-ray the original sort of unaltered dog's bollocks version, and then you can have your primo, you know, RuPaul dragged up 4K version for the fanboys. Like, but give me a version of the original, you know? I'd like that. But anyway, there's your 7 reasons why 4K and all that. You know, DVD and Blu-ray, by the way, they scale with the right equipment up to 4K at home, where I don't need to pay a studio to charge me 5 times the amount for them to do it. You know, I can pop in Jaws on Blu-ray on my 4K Blu-ray player, and it scales beautifully. If you buy the right player, you have a great scaler built into it. And my 4K OLED telly, this looks phenomenal on, you know? It looks like 4K. It has that, my player, the Panasonic UB something or other, has profiles in it that I can fine-tune the picture, you know, calibration. And it gives me 3 profiles. So I can have a DVD profile, a Blu-ray profile, and a 4K profile. So I can play the formats in their best, upscale to 4K, you know. DVDs look amazing. I did a review a while back, Coyote Ugly, and on my 4K Blu-ray player, it upscaled it to look like a Blu-ray. When I played it on my native DVD player with a Kramer scaler, which honestly makes DVDs look like Blu-ray. It didn't actually scale it that well, you know, and then I realized it's because it's a region 2 disc, so I should be using my 4K Blu-ray player being a region 2 player, whereas the DVD is all set up for American DVDs, and it makes American DVDs look like Blu-rays. The Kramer scaler, I got it 20 quid off eBay, you know, 20 quid, and I can still utilize DVDs which are like £1 or £2 a pop. You know, I don't want to go pay 50, 60 quid for a film on 4K when I can buy 50 or 60 films on DVD and enjoy it the same exact way. Like, have probably a better experience on DVD because the sound matches more closely the theatrical version than the 4K does, and pay 5 times the amount. Like, do you know what? Whatever, guys. If you prefer 4K, enjoy, you know, enjoy that. Fine. I do enjoy 4K when it's done correctly. I will go out. I really do think I've lost it now. Literally. This 4K is really good because most of the film was done in 4K. It was, I think it was shot on film as well, but it was mastered, all the special effects in 4K. And this 4K looks really good. I think this is nice. I imagine somebody's going to come to me and say, actually, that was an upscale, mate. But I think this is a really good 4K disc. Probably underrated film, and I hope he makes a sequel. But I really like this. And this was made in like 2014 or something. And it was all done properly. Films that are older than 2009, you might as well get on DVD and Blu-ray, you know, because it's going to be an upscale job. Even if they've scanned at 4K, it's still going to be upscaled. The elements within that film are not 4K. They're like 2K or 1K, and it's being upscaled. And it's just not good. When digital stuff upscales, it's not as good as being native. And get films that have been made after 2012 on 4K, they're most likely going to be better. Because most likely the CGI was made in 4K. Most likely the film comes from either a digital camera, which might have been shot at 2K still, but most likely was filmed at 4K. And the CGI within it was most likely made in 4K, you know, and it's going to look better in 4K. So, anyway, that's my rant over, guys. I'm sorry, it's been bloody 40 minutes. Well, it might be less if I've edited half this shit out. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Take care. Bye-bye. I have gone to the middle.